Hi guys, so this video is a bit different to my normal videos. I wanted to talk about mental health problems today, and it's something that's very close to my heart, something that I personally have struggled with, and that many of my friends struggle with as well. I know that since the suicides of Kate Spade, among others, there's been a big focus on suicide itself. Now, I think talk is always a good thing, opening up that conversation. But I do also really believe that we need to really think about and learn about what we're talking about. Simply sharing a Facebook post just isn't enough. The hashtag check on all your friends is quite common at the moment. Firstly, I want to say that it may not be that those who've lost their lives to suicide were not checked up on. I don't think I've spoken about it before on here, but I've spent time in psychiatric hospitals. There are people there who are being supported by staff, family and friends, and they still die from suicide. I know of one person who just was an obsessive suicide attempter. Now she ended up with everything taken off her. Her room was bare, she had no shoelaces, etc. However, you know, she was still attempting with everything. She was suddenly running into the wall to try and smack her head. So don't assume that the family and friends of those who've killed themselves have not been available to and supporting that person. The conditions of hospitals is something I may discuss in another video if people would like, but it's another huge conversation, so I don't want to go into how good, how bad, positives and negatives, the system at the moment. And of course, talking and being available, supporting your friends does always help, but I'm just saying, don't assume that the people who have killed themselves weren't being supported. Checking up is a little patronizing, I think, personally. It's not necessarily checking up if you're already in a relationship with someone. It's just maintaining a normal relationship, but it's actually making sure that you do ask how they are and whether anything is troubling them. Making sure you're there for your friends is a really good thing. However, action is actually the most important thing. Don't just ask them if they're okay and then they say they're feeling bad, you have a chat and leave it, with them still feeling bad. If they're not okay, you really, as a friend, need to try and help them if you can. If that's something you want to do. And I think if you're raising awareness and saying, check up on all your friends, then you really need to be taking the next step and going into action. Act upon your friend being unwell. Encourage them to talk to you. If they need to see a doctor, then go that next step. Go with them if they're anxious about it. Help them write down what they're struggling with so it's easier to explain to the doctor. Remind them how much you care by acting rather than just speaking. If you know they're isolated during the day, if you can go round, then that's great, go round, but try to call them, or even if you can't do that, send messages. It's a really small thing, but it can make a big difference when you're feeling very isolated and alone, and those thoughts creep in or even you're having voices telling you that you don't matter, no one cares. If you are then receiving messages from people saying that they do care, sharing a joke that was funny, showing that they know you, and enjoy you and think of you enough to send you a message, that can actually be quite a big, small thing and make a difference. Tell them that you've noticed them acting a little differently and explain why you're worried. You don't need to be the whole blunt or are you depressed, or the kind of patronizing, I thought I'd check up on you. You know, just say to them, hey, George, you know, I've noticed you're a bit down recently and you've been looking really tired. Are you all right? How are you feeling? You know, make it normal. Give gentle suggestions of things that might help. You know your friends, so you know what cheers them up. You can look for suggestions as well online if you really need to. But, you know, perhaps encouraging them in lifestyle changes can be really good, but they may not be in a place to make those at that point. Do not discourage them from taking medication. If they're prescribed medication, you know, it's not your place to discourage them to take it or say negative things about it. And I'm going to come back to that later. There is a lot at the moment about taking care of yourself, and I absolutely agree that you should make sure that you are safe and not overwhelmed. However, I have seen it in real life often, as well as seen comments online. And I don't tend to get involved, but, you know, it riles me. And I've seen it as an excuse to back off from a person who's dealing with really difficult psychiatric issues, or feeling, you know, very overwhelmed about life, perhaps worthless or hopeless, perhaps simply that everything is too much. There are so many different reasons. If the person is already under a psychiatric team, then encourage them to call that team if you're worried. And if you're seriously worried and you don't think they've called, or you don't think that perhaps their call is being taken seriously, then call yourself. It may be you're afraid to call a mental health team or doctor or helpline because you don't want to risk your friendship, and you think that your friend would respond, you know, respond to it with upset or by cutting you off, perhaps. However, if it comes from the right place in you, and you are seriously worried, then it's a risk you need to take, really, and that really can save lives. I have been on both ends of that. I've been on that end a lot of times, including calling an ambulance for a friend who had overdosed, and she was a very new friend. And I did think she was going to cut off our friendship, but actually we got through that because she saw it was from the right place. And I'm not saying that always happens at all, but I knew she was going to be angry, and I took her anger and I just said, you know, I did it because I don't want to lose you. And yeah, that is a risk you kind of have to take, in my opinion. You know, do you want someone who's died when you know you could have made the phone call? Or do you want someone who lived and doesn't speak to you anymore, but you know they're actually doing a lot better now? And they may even come to a place in the future where they can speak to you, or it may be just too much, you know, there may be too much turmoil from that time for them to come back. I have had someone call an ambulance for me, and they're still my best friend. Right now, they're the godmother of my son. Now, I just want to highlight how difficult it can actually be to access help from mental health services. This is coming from England. However, I don't doubt it's relatively international. It can be helpful if your friend's in the process of getting help, to ask how it's going, to keep note of whether support is being given and whether you think that enough support is being given and they are actually safe. If, you know, these doctors and so on only see them for a very brief period of time, and it may be that they simply haven't picked up on something and you actually think, oh my goodness, you know, their mood has really dropped or got a lot higher, or, you know, they seem to be struggling a lot with voices suddenly more so, and their self-care has suddenly gone absolutely to pot. And, you know, then phone again, phone the mental health services that they're with and just say, you know, I'm really worried, could you go and, you know, organise an appointment with them ASAP, basically. And of course there is A&E if you believe that that person warrants emergency care. They often do have rooms as well where someone who needs to be away from people can go. Now, when you're struggling with mental health issues, you may not personally be in a position where you can chase up mental health teams and doctors to find out what's going on with your care, or perhaps get a date moved because that problem is more urgent and needs faster attention. So as a friend, it can be really helpful to make the chasing phone calls. It can also be really helpful to go with them to an appointment and give a good picture of the seriousness, you know, the level that you feel that they're at and the issues that you've noticed. You know, you can discuss this with them before, but it is sometimes in psychiatric care, you have to go against what the patient wishes because they are not in a place to make healthy decisions. And as a friend, that's really your call, or a family member, of course. But, you know, if you feel that actually, for example, someone with an eating disorder actually hasn't been eating as much as they say they have been, or perhaps they've been purging their food, so they've been eating the meals, but they have been purging them, and they're sitting there saying that it's all fine, then you may need to point out that it's not, in your opinion. And you know, you can do it in a gentle, caring way. This doesn't have to be an argumentative or offensive thing to do. And again, you may risk upsetting that person, but at the end of the day, sometimes it may be worth upsetting that person in order for them to really continue and fulfill their life. You know, people die waiting for help. They die because the doctors haven't seen the seriousness of the problem. They also die after they've just been seen, and their problems have been written off as smaller. People die, a lot of people die waiting for eating disorder care, but a lot of people die waiting for all sorts of mental health care. And it's actually shocking, the amount of people who need appointments and simply can't get them close enough to really save them and have positive intervention. Now, I want to say that depression is spoken about a lot. It's a big one, isn't it? You know, and there are very varying degrees of it. Same as many psychiatric problems have varying degrees, many physical health problems have varying degrees. So I really think that if we're going to talk about depression, we also need to be talking about schizophrenia, BPD, which is also known as emotionally unstable personality disorder, is the same as borderline personality disorder, and other personality disorders as well, like avoidant personality disorder, PTSD, which might be misdiagnosed as BPD, EUPD, bipolar, eating disorders, and dissociative identity disorder. You know, all of them, you know, all of the psychiatric illnesses, including ones I haven't mentioned, need to be discussed and accepted. It's not okay to simply accept people with depression but still have fears about someone who suffers with schizophrenia. And all of these problems really can lead to or contribute to suicide, but they just don't get mentioned. often anyway. There might be drug and alcohol problems involved, or other addictions. Screen or technology addiction, which is a growing problem, is being shown to alter the brain pathways and chemicals that can lead to feelings of desperate need and hopelessness, essentially, you know, are there. So I think what I'm trying to say is, you know, we need to open up discussion much further, and really learn about what we're talking about. We're actually now in the process of discovering that chemicals in the body are often causing these reactions. This can actually happen with things like PTSD. It's the trauma can cause the body to respond in a certain way, and response patterns of chemicals then develop, which can ultimately contribute to this post-traumatic stress. Now, the combinations of these chemicals are not always something that can be controlled alone, which is why it's pointless saying cheer up to someone who's depressed, but it's equally, you know, pointless saying stop listening to your voices to someone who's got schizophrenia, or other psychotic disorders, you know, bipolar, for example, borderline personality disorder, for example. And although changes to lifestyle and so on, they can really help, it might be that if that person is already in the throes of it, that they may not actually be able to just make those changes. It's not often understood that the strength and the effect of these chemicals can be likened to drugs taken. Now, if someone takes MDMA and acts strangely, we don't expect them to always have the ability to stop acting strangely. We see it as something which has altered their behaviour enough that they do not have control over what they're doing. You know, so for example, they may not have control about the you know, voice changes. Sometimes people get voice changes on MDMA. We don't expect them to just be able to snap out of that, because it's not actually, you know, possible, really. And in many ways, the effects of bipolar mania can be compared to the effects of stimulant drugs. It can even cause the same tight jaw muscles as stimulants, and repetitive movements known as motor agitation. It's also called other things as well. Similarities can be found between all sorts of mental health problems and drugs, like taken drugs. And new ones are being found all the time between these, you know, psychiatric disorders and taken drugs, and the effects and that they have on the brain and the chemical responses that are going on when we see the symptoms of mental illness. Now, I think it's very important to mention here that with medication, you are trying to correct that balance. And some people may be, you know, lucky enough, really, that they don't need to take medication and they can do things another way. You know, some people may find that they only need to take a drug for a short time, for example, or they don't need to take one at all. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs psychiatric medication at all. I'm also not saying that there aren't a huge amount of problems with it. But what I'm saying is that actually sometimes the benefits outweigh the problems. And sometimes it can be truly life-saving and life-changing. I've seen people with severe schizophrenia completely unable to live in the world, really, and I've seen them, you know, a year later, and they're back at uni, or they're in a job, and really enjoying it and loving life again. And that's truly amazing. Now, I'm not also saying that herbs don't have the power to really make the changes that we do with man-made medication. However, at the moment, because we have spent a lot of time working out chemical substances in this country, and not very much time working out the true benefits of herbs, and also because there are, of course, issues with, testing herbs on people when you know that there's a medication that can help. Because of those things, we haven't got there yet. We haven't got to the point where herbal medicine in England can absolutely help, without psychiatric drugs, a person to become stable. Now, I'm studying at the moment, and my hope is that I will be able to find more herbal roots for psychiatric problems, really. And yeah, my hope is that one day we will have safer and better ways of treating these awful issues. But at the moment, we don't have them. So please make sure that you are alerting people if your friend is suddenly missing their medication. Please make sure that you are encouraging them to take it and to see it as a positive thing, and to talk to their doctor about side effects. If you find you get very dehydrated, you get a dry mouth or whatever, if you find that you are too tired to function at all on it, if you find that you're really struggling with weight gain, or any of these sorts of things, please talk, or encourage your friend to talk to their doctor about it, because there are often ways that can help those things, or you can change to a different medication that may suit you better. And I completely agree that the side effects are not nice. I have been on some very strong psychiatric medication, and it wasn't for me. It helps my problems, but it takes away a part of me. And that kind of decision, though, is down to the patient and their doctor, how well they are at the time they make it, and so on. Now, you supporting your friend is really so much more than just checking up on them, because it's this relationship, and it's trying really to learn and open up to what psychiatric problems actually are, what the routes to help people actually are for their particular condition, and how they experience it. And people also have very different views on what causes it. So some people may have a view that it's a spirit thing. Some people may view it as simply a biological and chemical process. Some people may view it as both. There are so many different ways to view these things. But something that isn't helpful, really, I don't think, is saying that it's a karma thing. If you're saying it in the way of, you're a bad person, you failed to fulfill your previous life, that's not helpful. It's also not helpful to put into someone with schizophrenia's head that they are possessed by demons, or that they have negative spirits attacking them in a lot of ways, unless they already believe that and there is a pathway through that to help them. your views are essentially unimportant on that score. What you need to be dealing with is the problems in front of you and the feelings of your friend who is experiencing them. Yeah, I think that's mostly what I want to say, really. This is a very strange video for me today, but I really feel like it was very, very important for me to say the things that I've said, really. And yeah, I think that's really everything. I might add some at another point, but blessings to you all. And if you are struggling, or your friends are struggling, then you know my thoughts and blessings are with you, because that's really tough. Bye, guys. So I did want to say one last thing. Mental illnesses can be seen very differently, and as I discussed earlier, you know, some people may see it from a very central place, from the point of view as it's a spiritual attack, or possession perhaps, or hearing spirits. Other people may see it purely biologically. Other people may see it as a behaviour choice, which I think is really being written off, essentially for many, although behaviour choices can help. I certainly don't view mental health problems as a behaviour choice. I won't go into my full views because I don't feel like it's particularly helpful, actually. But what I will say is that what is helpful is how the person views it. And as I was saying earlier, this really links to that. Even the guidelines now show that because it may be viewed as a spiritual gift, or perhaps simply being linked to hearing spirits, you know, perhaps that person doesn't see it as a gift, but does see it as something that they're able to do. That needs to be taken into consideration, and as a witch, I felt this was worth mentioning at the end. So, you know, it may be simply that person, you don't need to discourage them to take their medication, but there are other ways as well, aren't there? So, you know, you can help them in witchy ways as well, if that's what they would like. If it's you can help yourself in witchy ways as well, if that's what you would like. If you're really struggling with hearing spirits and so on, and you would like to help yourself in witchy ways, I do not advocate simply doing them yourself, because you may be in a place where you're actually very unwell. I don't know, I'm speaking from a camera, so I can't see or feel or hear what you can right now. So I would advocate going to a trusted witch to help with that. I would like to tell a quick story of when I was at school. Somebody's father heard voices telling him that he could get rid of them if he cut out the demon in his stomach. Now this is truly disturbing, but that's what he did. And that's why I'm saying I advocate witchy ways, but under the supervision of someone who knows what they're doing if you're having serious problems. You know, if you feel, often, you know, if you're being attacked spiritually and that's what you believe is happening, and it's got to the point where you would be deemed psychotic, you know, seriously psychotic, then you need to be getting assistance with that from someone who knows what they're doing. Don't just try and do something yourself and have it end horribly. You know, there's a lot of help out there in witchy circles as well as mental health circles, but be careful who you go to, do your research, ask you know, trusted people and a lot of people. If you are not in the position to do that and you want that to happen, ask a friend who you can trust to do that for you, or a family member. Yeah, don't just act upon whatever spirits are telling you. If you believe it's spirits, spirits are tricksy anyway. They like to tell lies, they like to pretend. It's, you know, it's their empowerment, isn't it, in a lot of ways. And I'm speaking broadly here. There are obviously differences in that, but as a broad term. So yes, that's all I wanted to add, really, I think. So apart from the not going on about sort of not imposing your ideas, basically, don't impose your ideas on this person. You know, don't disrespect what they believe either. So work with them, alongside them, to get to a place that's better for everybody. And whether that means a split in your friendship that ends up better for them, whether that means simply walking alongside them and holding their hand, or, you know, doing the active things that I've already mentioned, and other active things. You know, there are so many things you can do to help that person. And if you're wanting to add in herbs to help, you may like to experiment with some yourself. But visiting a medical herbalist can be very helpful because they will tailor it exactly to you. It's not like a doctor who writes a prescription based on a broad list of symptoms that you happen to fit. This is tailored towards your exact symptoms, how you experience them, and your history and own physicality, really. You know, do you have issues in your gut that is preventing you from digesting things, or do you suffer with sleepless nights? It's tailored exactly to how you and your body are. Well, your body is you, so how you are. Yeah, so blessings to everyone, and much love. Mwah. Thinking of you all.